Now,
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Talking with Poets. I'm delighted today to introduce to you Marc Vincenz, a good friend and actually publisher as well for me, one of my books, and really an amazing behind the scenes and voice in American poetry. I mean, when I say behind the scenes, I mean as a publisher. I think, at Mad Hat Press, he has published over 200 titles, and so his community work as a poet is really legendary, spreading the word through dark times. Including the pandemic, where he started with others a series that really has reached all over the world and brought poets together through their work. The Lit Balm series. But we're here today to talk about a lovely new book of his called The Pearl Driver of Irunmani. You can see the luminous and sort of foreboding cover of this diver deep in the blue depths of the ocean. And then it's published by Milkweed, sorry,
no,
White Pine Press. My apologies, White Pine Press, and readily available where good books are sold. So, Marc, let's dive into the Pearl Diver. Not to be facetious in my use of the verbs, but tell me about what brought you to write this book. Why this title? Where is Irunmani? Whatever, just as a way of introduction to any reader.
sure, Indran, happily. Well, I mean, the bulk of the book was written in pretty grim times. First, the very rapid death of my mother,
Yeah.
then followed by my own illness, which nearly pushed me over the edge as well, which took something like 2.5 years to recover from. So all of that is in there, including stints in the intensive care unit and that sort of thing as well.
Right, right.
But I would say really, where is Irunmani? Irunmani is a place in my imagination. In fact, interestingly enough, a colleague was going to write a review and spent literally 2 days trying to Google where Irunmani was. Of course, they didn't find it.
Right.
And they got so irritated by that, they decided not to write the review.
Okay.
So, yeah, Irunmani is a location in my mind, in my consciousness, if you like, a place that I was diving to, in the process of thinking that I was dying as well.
Right. By the way, you're slightly on one edge of the screen. I don't know if your camera, if you want to move it so that you're more centered in the frame.
No, this is the angle I always shoot from.
You always shoot from. All right, then we'll take this angle. No problem. I just thought I did.
I haven't been to Lip Balm in a while, Indran, so you haven't seen it.
Well, now that fact has been revealed in front of public space. I'll be back. I'll be back.
Well, next Saturday we have a good one actually.
All right.
Let me
But
see.
no, but
Just
let's get
okay.
back. Let's get back to the
Oh,
Pearl
sure.
Diver. Yeah. No. I mean, a country of the imagination, a city of the imagination, a place of the
An
imagination,
island, an
an
island.
island of the imagination. Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, I think of Invisible Cities or some other book where or even a place like Ithaca in a poem by Cavafy. I mean, does Ithaca, what does Ithaca really mean? Or and it's the journey that counts, right? So what is the diver diving for in this? Yeah, exactly. You have it close at hand.
Pearl, the pearl, of course.
Yeah,
Divers diving for the pearl of wisdom, of knowledge, of tranquility.
yeah.
a oneness with the universe.
You know, very good. I mean, the language is quite intelligible and clear, and yet there's a ghostliness to the effects of the words you use. And yes, I was very much thinking of death reading the book, and not something too dramatic as the stench of death, but the slight odor of it, hanging over, and the melancholy that results from it, and writing your way through it. Do you think that writing the book is a kind of therapy? I mean, I know this is a very standard answer, but uh, is it at
Yeah,
least
yeah, I would say. I mean, every book for me is a therapy,
right?
but the way I write, I always try and challenge myself every single time I write a new book.
Right, right.
I try and do it, somehow differently. One of my friends has called me the David Bowie of poetry, because every album is different.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
But that I enjoy that. That gives me a lot of inspiration to create new worlds, new mythologies, explore the subconscious, the unconscious, um, kind of, you might say, even in a shamanic trance fashion,
Mm-mm.
to discover something more about the universe and how you are part of it.
Yep, yep. Let's hear a little a couple of poems from the book, and then I also want to ask you to reveal a little bit about the poem that runs, the poem within the poem in the book. I mean,
Oh,
it
sure.
goes throughout the book. It's a wonderful idea. I haven't come across it before, where I'll be reading along, and then I see a line, and then I'll see another line a few pages later, and then you start stringing them together, and it's another poem. But why don't you begin by reading a couple of poems, perhaps right at the beginning, if you like.
Yeah. I would just start with the first poem, actually.
Sure, wonderful.
The Crest of Memories. When the wind becomes my heart, and I undo your eyes on night's other edge, a bitter taste floods my tongue like a nub of tamarind. The absence drinks you dry, and you recall the reasons of forgetting and why you've learned to sleep in that shadow memory. What is the sound of love in this dark hour of death? The look in your eyes as you drift aside and far away in some other knowledge where songs suffused with lilacs and blazing stars help you die of such things. Sorry, the telephone's ringing.
No problem.
I hope my wife will pick it up.
All right.
I'll just go on.
Please do. Yeah.
And this is the continuation of this poem. Or those absent figures orbiting waters, most tranquil, the endless returning, in the shadow of days where no outside nor inside pervades, comforting like wind through the pines, then that glowing sadness in the wrinkle of water as we slip from the dream. Coming up to eye level, we open the windows and doors, and finally let the dusk enter.
It's rather chilling, isn't it? I mean, you're rising up out of what seems to be a rather fragile place. I'm sort of deep, submerged in water or in some, and then but you rise up, and then
I'm
to
sorry,
the
say again?
dusk. Then you rise up, but then it's to the dusk. Meaning, I mean, not sunlight, not birds chirping, but the dusk. I I don't know. I find that. I mean, my emotional reaction is sort of being chilled by it, or sort of, I mean, it's
And then it follows, of course, with the one line, shall we say, parallel poem, which is written in grey in the book.
right.
Movements swallowed by the blue-green. So that is like sort of, it starts to take you into the ocean there.
Right. If you look at the page, you see the other poem begins at the bottom here, that one line. And then as you scroll through the book, you'll find other lines like that, and then you start connecting those two. For example, page 26, you'll see the line at the bottom, just as it was on page 24. So just so readers can enjoy that as they're reading along, 26, and then again 28, and so on. So please read. Let's hear a couple of more, and then
Sure,
we can
sure.
talk. Yeah.
And this is the next one in the book, and it's called "And Once Where Wind Was Born." Ancestral rhythms, desolate voices, that endless floating downstream, never again remembered. But in those little songs that passed like leaves, songs like voices in the park, rainbow variations, the colors of a forest once read in your palms, paper, months, whispers, vespers, a louvering light. Cure me not to know, your fading face tightening, thinning into mist, growing ancient. Feel the thirst, child, that fading endlessly into a mirror of ourselves.
So I like what you said earlier about taking on a new challenge with each book and doing the David Bowie poetry, and then so the challenge here is to go inside, literally, or going inside the sea of one's consciousness,
That is
and
that is totally correct. You're back in the womb,
yeah, yeah, and
and you're searching for the pearl of knowledge or the pearl of
yeah.
harmony.
And are these poems coming to you sometimes from dreams or from waking or deep meditation, and then writing?
All my writing comes from deep meditation. Before I write, I normally meditate for about anywhere from 15 minutes to half an hour to get into the world that I'm writing about.
Mm, mm, mm.
And at a certain point, I'm just in, and it just flows. And the narratives, the characters, the situations, they find their own way to the surface.
Right, right. Um, I find it really beautiful, that ancestral rhythms, desolate voices, the endless floating downstream, never again remembered, but in those little songs that pass like leaves, songs like voices at the park, rainbow variations. I mean, anywhere you can pick up in this book and just and lose yourself in these meditations. Each one a koan, I suppose, to be sort of unraveled in the mind with slow, patient digestion. I mean, these are not poems that they're not poems about the news, for example, or they're not uh, directly. They don't impact you directly. It's a kind of osmosis, a seeping into the consciousness, I think, as one
That's right.
reads them. And then you have a question. I mean, the book has 5 parts, if I'm correct. If I remember, no,
That's
more
that's
than one, two, three,
one,
four,
two,
five,
oh,
6 parts.
oh,
An Unchartable Truth, Clams. Just listen to these titles of the sections. An Unchartable Truth, right? Not, I mean, so you can't chart it. Clams, what do the clams hide inside? Limbo Returns, Suffering Light, Coming Up for Air, and Grown from Sand. Coming Up for Air made me think of, I think there's a book of Orwell's, right? Coming Up for Air written in the 30s.
maybe I don't know.
Yeah, anyway, it made me think of that. Grown from Sand. You see, so, and then you have a bunch of poems under each of these titles. So one way into the book, perhaps, is to take that title and then see if the poems in that section sort of address this search for the unchartable truth, or the search for truth, or the sort of the definition of truth, or the description of truth in some form or another. And then the individual poems are titled in that section, A Crest of Memories, and Once Where Wind Was Born. Could I be saying this all in all my own voices? sea beast, nefesh, which is a lovely word I had to look up, but of course it has to do with sentience, right? A kind of um, uh, mean, how shall I put sentience? A sort of, well, I'll let you define it. Stories seen in the carvings, first astronaut on Jupiter, dance of spring water, artificial flowers, disillusion, oil sheet. All these titles, they're related to each other, you know. And so there's a kind of a architecture to this book that's really very subtle and very, very beautiful. The there's no extraneous word or extraneous title here. They all seem to add up, but you have to be willing to meditate on each one and make the connections.
I mean, many of these works were. I was reading a lot of Tang Chinese poetry at the time,
Okay.
so I'm sure some of those influences resonate through there as well. But really, at the end, it was about finding. Yes, it was a process for me. This book helped me get back to life, so to speak. You know.
Right, right. I wonder if you'd want to talk a little bit about the personal medical scare that led to. I
All
mean,
right. Sure.
I mean, in the sense that it's related to the writing of these
Yeah.
poems.
So very briefly, when I came back from AWP, I believe it was in Seattle. What was that? 2019? Is that right?
No, Seattle was probably 2021, I think, maybe. Could it be? Or 2020? I'm not sure.
It's been twice, but anyway,
Yeah.
um, it was just before the pandemic. I get hit with something called a thyroid storm, which is very, very rare. But basically, your thyroid works like crazy and starts to attack all your bodily functions and your organs. And so when I actually got to the hospital, my heart rate was at 220 in standing position. You know.
Oh dear.
Initially, the doctors were like, "Oh, we don't know what to do. Might have to be a heart transplant or something." And then suddenly someone comes and says, "No, no, no, it's the thyroid. It's the thyroid." So they corrected that and then ambulanced me to Boston, where I stayed on heart monitors and was poked and prodded continuously for 10 days straight. Finally allowed to leave. Anyway, I made it through. But it took me a good sort of year and a half to kind of get back to my former strength, or even now I would say I'm not 100% back to my strength previously. Probably only 80% really. But yeah, I feel pretty okay. So yeah, it's basically, you know, threading through the eye of the needle is also what the book is about, you know.
Right, right, right. So
And in terms of the structure of it, you know, I write all my books, all my poems in books. I very rarely write individual poems.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about the book as I'm writing it, you know, and also the arc and the narrative and how things tie together and so on many levels. And so, you know, also the section titles, you know, spend a lot of time thinking about these as well. What I'd like to do is read the first poem from Clams, if that's
Yes,
okay.
please, please.
Because, well, the last poem about unchartable truth is Oil Sheen, which is kind of a bit of a grim view of the world, as you can even infer from the title.
Right.
But Meteor Showers, which is in the Clam, is something more hopeful.
And that wonderful line in the poem that runs through the book, below the title of Clams, you know, see the island in your mind, or you'll always be lost. You know.
So yeah, that was inspired by a documentary I saw
Mm.
about Pacific Islanders and how they navigate the waters. And I believe one of them said something quite similar to that, that you have to see where you're headed. But I figured, it was also a great metaphor for your personal island, right?
Yes, right, right. Um, why don't you read about three or four, just read Meteor Showers and the two or three poems after that to give our readers, listeners, a sort of a sense of the suite and the flow. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, sure. So clams, see the island in your mind, or you will always be lost. And then a one-line poem, which is part of the longer thread poem that runs through the book. Somehow we turn to stone in the presence of the breathing sea. And Meteor Showers is the first poem in that section. And as the dream reaches out toward us, darkness falls again. A wheel spins in the unknown engine. At the end of the hall, a figure of a man arrested in a murmur of voices. That man is carved stone, facing ocean. And then the one-line thread poem that runs at the bottom. The seagulls tear toward thundering waters and drink in all the voices. And so it's starting to get a little more optimistic. And we have summer's surface next. Summer's surface crackling in its gnarled edges and warmed kinks. We slip through the noose of home and prance out into the white sails of the big outdoors, where insects are performing in their wholesome blue. One-line poem. Water rises to touch the light, the eye-beams of the sun. And the next poem gets very metaphysical. Cosmic impulse. She tells me how ocean is the memory of all things thought, thinking, considered, how the sea seethes in its impulse to capture each fleeting instinct, to transmute thought into sidereal time. It's kind of a meditation on the origin of life
Yes, yeah.
and creativity.
And-
Now, go on.
No, and then you go on to the next poem. Perhaps we can read that as well, and then we can
Oh,
talk a little bit to discover Descartes. Yeah.
to discover Descartes. To discover the discarded, the forgotten, or once pervade, in part toxic, the heart of a word slithering towards small truths under a starry sky, and those thousand eyes of mammalian longing, or to sleep among the scavengers and predators, but alive in the dark, obliterated in the pavilions of the insects, in the wake of pollen and fragrance, everything filled in and used, but barely used up. The sparkles that catch the light of the passing cars or trucks carting consciousness, or perhaps more aptly, a self-consciousness edging toward the warmth of morning. Fantastic to feel how the earth grows back into itself, pushing itself back toward the past, toward the ocean like a memory transmuted, or a deep loneliness caving in on itself, where everything is water, where everything sinks.
Mm. What a what a powerful finish there. Everything is water, everything sinks. I couldn't help listening. Consciousness edging toward the warmth of morning. I kept thinking of the slouching towards Bethlehem to be born, and then earlier I loved this line in Meteor Showers that for its simplicity and its classical grace, that man is carved stone facing ocean. I mean, and then I think of Rapa Nui, Easter Island, right? And And
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So as I read you, I travel to places I've traveled to only in my imagination, really, or in photographs. Or I've never been to Easter Island, but Pablo Neruda visited that island, uh, and wrote a whole book of poems about his visit. Um, and you are visiting. I mean, what I'm trying to say is just, your book is also, it's a travel. I mean, it's an invitation to travel in the mind, for each reader, and to go interior, to go into the interior. I mean, I think it's a very good book for inspiring one to sort of explore all kinds of little interstices between of experiences. You know, there. I mean, I always like to think everything is possibly a subject for poetry, but has one, I mean, can we capture every every thought, every cell as it moves between, in the body? I think you have that kind of ambition
Yeah,
in
you're
this
right.
book.
You're right. Sure.
And I salute that. I celebrate that. Um,
Well, it's a lot of it has to do with kind of command of language or linguistics even.
yeah. But
But certainly
how
helps to be a
how
translator as well.
it helps to what? Sorry.
It helps to be a translator as well.
Yes, but how important is social meaning for you? I mean, when you write a poem, when I mean by social meaning, how important?
Incredibly, incredibly.
Incredibly important. Okay, so then, do you think that these poems give enough of the? How do they give the? Do they teach uh, the reader how to walk, or do they get the reader to walk by sort of? Do they give the secrets away and the reader just walks? I mean, what I mean is you. I,
I mean, I perceive it, and I don't think I'm unique in explaining it in this fashion, but I
yeah.
think as you enter the book, for example, or as you even enter the individual poem, you're given clues as to how to read it as you go.
Mm-mm-mm.
Some people like to have a title that's kind of very self-explanatory.
Right.
I have a tendency to like mysterious titles, um, that are certainly part of the poem, but maybe the mental leap that you need to make is a little bit far than normal.
Right.
Um,
Right. The poem is completed by the reader, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Does the read can the reader complete these poems? It's a philosophical question
Hmm.
about. I mean, or
I
it
don't
might.
know. I don't know. I mean, does any artist know what resonates?
Right. 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 Um, let's take a poem like "Summer's Surface," which is on page 41. Crackling in its gnarled edges and warmed kinks, we slip through the noose of home and prance out into the white sails of the big outdoors where insects are performing in their wholesome blue. I mean, you just read this, and it's a beautiful poem. It's an imagist poem. I mean, in the sense you can see the insects performing in their blue, but it's not a good example of a poem that cannot be completed by the reader. That's what I'm trying to say. But I think there are here and there. I wonder whether, you don't use
Don't forget
footnotes.
that the title of the poem is Summer's Surface.
Right, right, right.
Surface.
Surface. That's right.
So
Um,
there's something more that doesn't quite meet the eye, actually, if you think about it.
okay, okay. Um,
This is a kind of an idealist poem, yeah, of course.
yeah, yeah.
What if,
Can I ask you? Sorry, you've got about, I don't know how, you have many books of translations, many books of your own. I mean, perhaps a dozen books of your own poetry, at least.
no more?
More than
Uh,
that. Okay.
I think it'll be, well, including those that have now been signed to be published. I think it'll be 23 books of original poetry.
Okay. Right. So over 30 books of published poetry, including your translation. So a lot of work.
Even more,
Uh,
though. Altogether, over 40 books.
oh, 40 books, yeah. Uh, uh, now, I'm trying to understand about. I mean, despite what you said about David Bowie, and that each album is a new adventure, a new take. What is the what do you want to leave the reader with in this particular book? I mean,
In this
stylistically, yeah,
in Pearl Diver, what do I
yeah,
want to leave the reader
yeah,
with?
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Um,
I mean,
well,
besides the pleasure of the meditation and the images, to the metaphors to to digest and to ponder.
well, there are a bunch of political poems in here um, as well. Some somewhat veiled
Mm,
political poems, but they are. For example, um, Oil Sheen is a political poem for sure.
yes, yeah. Why don't you read us a couple of these? Oil Sheen, for example, would be a good one.
All right, let's do Oil Sheen.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I have it well set up on my computer.
Okay. Oh, you don't have the book right there as well.
No, I have it on my computer, so it's
Okay.
much easier to read. Oil Sheen. Driving into desert country along the straight, tracked, man-made road. Ahead, the canyon billows dust smoke. Words tremble in the lobe. An old melody whirs deep in the bone. Light rises, or an illusion of it. Ahead, a field of weed wavers, lingers. Rusting water silos with perched crows. Serpents snaking somewhere below. And the carcass of a hillside emotionally reflects the mountains. Yes, shade, but where the underlying matter? And where is that fresh water we saved for this evening? And then the one-line poem at the bottom is there a magical phrase that can open water?
Yeah. A kind of a poem to accompany, you know, Road Warrior or something, or some dark apocalyptic ecological flick.
Well, apocalyptic, no. I mean, this is, really pulled from a real life situation
Yeah, yeah.
um, that, occurred in the backwaters of New Mexico. So, um, and you get to a place like that, full of trash and dust
Right.
and abandoned towns and things like that. And you just think to yourself, we are actually living, in Mad Max times or something.
Right, right. That's what I meant. I mean, it's already here. Okay, yeah, it's already here. Um,
And of course, oil sheen for obvious reasons. Sheen is the second part of the oil, right?
right, right, right. There's a
Actually,
great. I have I personally love this poem because I tend to love the political sub poems. Whenever they're written.
hmm,
But the poem that is political with through its images and so on, that it creates a landscape, shows the landscape. That's not there's no jargon in this, but this is a politics, the subject of the community, the meaning, polis, the Greek word for community business. I mean, this is a community matter which is writing
res
about.
publica.
That's right. That's right. Would you
That's
read a
that's where
couple of
republic come from, right?
right, right,
Res publica is republic.
Republic, right? Would you read? Uh, let's go to some of the last sections of the book. I was particularly moved, as I was reading towards the end, uh, in Grown from Sand. I mean, perhaps we could read some of those, and and
Well,
and I mean, the last poem in the book, you call it "Electrocuting Nights." It's a arresting title. I don't know. I don't want to finish with that yet, but let's go to the. And I also like to ask you about the poem Nacre. I don't know if you pronounce that word that way, Nacre. Yeah.
yeah, sure. Shall I read a couple from the beginning and then I could read a couple of them from the end? What do you think?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
All right. Um,
I also want to say that each section is a book within a book as well. I mean, that, you
oh,
can,
certainly.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, that's kind of the way I write.
right, right, right.
Or as another friend of mine, a writer, put it, um, you write from, you imagine yourself on a lake, and you write from one sort of boy to another boy,
Mm,
and then slowly you build up the boys, and suddenly you have, a web, a network in the middle.
that's right. Well said, yeah.
So,
So fall on until noon then.
yeah, coming up.
Thank you.
Um, and yes, this is from the section Grown from Sand. Forlorn until noon. Briefly sad, the grasses drooping, staring at their roots, bowed under the current, as if in wishing to say what they would have liked to, and tears have gathered at the tips of their questioning heads. And the one-line poem is, "This is forever, the tuna chasing minnows."
This is one of my four favorites of the book, actually. Fall on until noon.
Oh, thank you.
The tears have gathered at the tips of their questioning heads. Please keep reading, and then.
I will. After this, we have Karma. This one is particularly liked at the readings that I've given. Karma. How the birds have stopped singing, how the green has become grey, how your last words resonate. This is the very thing you are. A short note from the heart. I could still hear his laughs from where, while reading at the kitchen lamp, the night was windowless and the words split apart as the housefly drilled into the cracks. But there was grace here in its silent voluptuousness bearing down upon my breast like an ocean, ignorant, old, and preserving, and hunched I walked, narrow passage into the dreams of my dreams, afraid of what it meant to be orphaned, to be departed, or the money spent on acquiring identity, and the light that louvers in the I do, in the shuffling of thought between the latter and the former, and the fate of family or the smell of consequence, in all its sizes, flooded in impartial stares, how the near-sighted cloud in the pane has little fear of the unknown, and the illusion of will in the small, gentle order recalls the belligerent, the delinquent, the crushed genes of atomic time, where such small quarry was the pastime of lesser gods, forest spirits or water fry, where the sky forks away, and where we will reborn again every second Sunday among the birds.
Why every second Sunday? Sorry, I had to ask you a completely silly question because it's a beautiful poem, but I wonder, is there an answer?
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
There are many calendars.
Can we make our own calendars to get us out of the labyrinth and the complex fratricidal reality in which we're living? And is your book a helping hand?
Actually, I do believe it is. If you are inclined to be interested in the sonics of things, because all my poetry is about sonics,
Yeah.
about tones and alliteration and slant rhyme. It's all in there, and it's something that actually just comes naturally to me.
You're a musician, not only in your poetry. I mean, you're also a musician, playing instruments and making records. So
Absolutely. I have
Yeah,
a
makes
record
sense.
just almost finished. We're just deciding how and when to release it. It's called Left Hand Clapping.
Wonderful. Yeah, I look forward to listening to that. Uh, why don't you read us the meaning of on page 116?
Oh, for sure.
Because the search for meaning is, of course, a natural subject for an interviewer.
The meaning of in love with statues, pictures of faces moving into the moonlight, that strange reaction echoing, stirring the seeds of a glossy memory with a strong sense of sweat and strife, squat in the dark, and childish happiness lingers like a torn piece of cloth on a hook or a nail that once held an image of your own face, stoic, steady, sullen. The mind slips into its cells where the future is part of the old view. What if, from a hospice window along the causeway, went out into a calm and staring sea, matter swaps with matter, delicious strands of kelp bloom and rise with their eyes wide open.
Mm, yeah, I, I love the sounds. You're absolutely right. I mean, that is one great gift you give the world through in your poems, and the kelp. Now, kelp. I keep thinking of the wide Sargasso Sea, but this kelp is a weed, or is it a food that
It's a food, of course.
right?
It's
So
a symbol of fertility, and
right, yeah. So this is not the Sargasso. This is not the stuff that
don't forget they're delicious. So
right.
they must be pumped full of hormones at this stage.
Right, right, right. So a positive piece. Um,
Yeah, I mean, really, it is inspired by my experiences with my mother
yeah, yeah.
while she was
What
dying,
what is
um,
that?
and I rented a place for her in an assisted living home, which was not far from where I lived, so I could see her every day,
Right, right.
which I did. Um, and at one stage, I mean, she was dying very quickly of stage 4 cancer and had opted not to do any therapy or anything. And so, eventually she was taking pretty significant amounts of morphine to ease the pain. And at the same time, she appeared to be developing some form of Alzheimer's as well, but we don't know if the cancer had metastasized to her brain or something like that.
Mm,
Either way, pretty much every experience with mum after a certain stage was pretty surreal. She'd just make comments out of the
right.
blue. And in this particular case, she claimed that we were on a boat and that her balcony was the stern of the ship or something like that.
Mm,
And so that's why I say, what if from the hospice window along the causeway, went out into a calm, unstaring sea, matter swaps with matter?
that really is a gorgeous. I mean, out of the pain of coping with the dying of your mother, you come up with this life burgeoning. This kelp blooming. And I'm very sensitive to that, and we all are. I mean, I think we all have to cope with the passing of our mothers and our fathers. But in my case too, I was caring for my mother in a similar way until recently when she passed, and yeah,
Yeah,
coping with some of the same issues. Yeah.
it hits your heart. I mean, I personally think that my mother's death and my caring for her and so on, my anxiousness about her situation, because in my case, it was basically a sort of a 4-month trip to the edge of Dante's Inferno.
Mm,
Um,
I'm curious about your mother and your father. Did they give you poetry, or did you get poetry from somewhere else?
Where I got poetry from is anyone's, anyone can give it a shot. I don't know. It was just in me. No one in my immediate family was particularly artistic, um, not nor on my father's side nor my mother's side. My grandfather was a well-respected surveyor and map maker,
Hmm.
um, and did have some artistic talents, but mostly sort of confined himself to the realm of mathematics, really.
Okay, okay.
So he was about the closest. But when I was a kid, he'd draw a little picture in the book that they gave me for Christmas or something like that. Um, and he wasn't bad, but he didn't have shall we say, the blues or soul,
Okay,
that
okay.
feeling.
And when did you write your first poem? Do you recall how
Oh,
old you
absolutely,
were?
absolutely, absolutely. Um, I really started writing poetry through writing song lyrics, actually, in bands that I was in and so on. When I was probably started when I was about 12.
Okay.
Um,
So
and
you were in bands at 12, yeah?
yeah, I always played with a band in some form or fashion.
Mm.
Eventually, learning and becoming pretty proficient drummer
Mm.
uh, and percussionist. In fact, also, when I left the monastery school in Switzerland, which was where I was from the age of 11 until 15. Um, I came to the States. My parents had moved to Connecticut. They had moved from Hong Kong to Connecticut, and so yeah, I was just thrust into this new world, and I just realized early that if you want to, and it was interesting that I had this thought when I was very young, even I would say probably 6, 7 years old. My goal was always to be able to communicate to as many people as possible. Um, but and then sort of that kind of resonated with me in my entire writing education, because I went on to study with people like Reynolds Price and um, Joe Porter and Ariel Dorfman and people like that.
Yes.
When I was a Duke. Uh,
Ah, at Duke, yeah.
yeah,
I wonder if you ran across Laurent Dubois at Duke. He,
maybe.
he wrote about Haiti, I mean, various books on Haiti, professors there. Um,
I have to ask one of my friends because he was the president of the International Association
okay,
when we
okay,
were there.
right. No, I came across Laurent Dubois' his work because of my work in Haiti when I served there as an American diplomat, not that long ago. And of course, those years led to my book that you published, Poet and Poa, Poet of the Port. Um, Mark, this has been a really rich, wonderful, illuminating time with you. I only think we've just scratched the surface, really, but that's all right because it means that less is more, right? I think, and we're going to
Oh
learn
yeah,
more as we read more of your work, and I hope you'll come back to this space to talk about another book
I'd love to. I'd love to.
sometime.
Thanks so much for having me.
Sure. So if you would tell us a little bit about, I imagine the Pearl Driver, Irunmani is easily available
Oh
in
yes,
order.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You can get Pearl Diver pretty much everywhere, and any bookstore you can also order it, um, and it's available on Amazon. White Pine Press page as well.
Right.
Uh,
Uh, if I may say one thing, I'm very happy to know that. One thing, you are a poet. I mean, this may be easy. What is a poet's poet? But you are, in a sense. I mean, you are a poet's musician. what I'm saying is that you don't you don't suffer writing the easy line, but you write with a language that's intelligible, that anyone can just fall in love with, as long as they're willing to suspend their disbelief a bit, and not worry if they don't get, so to speak, get the poem on the first reading or the first listening. But if you sit with this book, I'll tell any reader, uh, it will grow into you. It will become an essential series of poems. When I say essential, I mean that you can't live without them, basically. So congratulations, Marc Vincenz, for giving me something I cannot live without, and for
Well,
giving all readers that. I hope people will find the book, The Pearl Driver of Irunmani. I mean, of course, there are many other books of Marc's that you can look for as well, but look for this one. And again, thank you, and let's meet again soon. I hope in person when I get up that way.
Should I not read the last poem in the book just to give?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. Let's finish. I was just going to say we should finish with the poem, so the last one is a good one.
Sounds good.
All right.
So yeah, this is the very end of the book. Imagine you've been through, death's doorway several times, and
Right.
you're coming out the other side. And this poem's called Electrocuting Nights. An idiom is a thief, a fine mesh filter for man's burden of grief. The dead must be laughing on their heads, making wild displays in their earthly hackles to outshine the wrinkles of winter, always summer bold and blooming. These are the moon's seeds, to mirror the joy of 10,000 seas. What would it take to break into blossom, dear creature? Drop into your forehead and dwell a while. Grasp your partner's wrist and stroll the streets as nobody else. Turn and face each other.
Wow. Turn and face each other. You're asking us to turn and face ourselves and the other.
Mm.
That's love your neighbor for me. That's stare at yourself and
I think the next poem will
be
probably be
modest.
something like, country rodeo dance or something like that.
Well done. Thank you for actually ending on a cheery note in a way. I mean, at least an uplifting note. And we're rising out of the water. The diver is rising up, and the pearl in his hands, in her hands. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Indran.
All right. I'll close the official part of this. Sorry.
No worries.
All right. I'm going to have to close the meeting entirely. Thank you
Okay.
very much, Marc. All the best to you.
See you soon. Thanks.
Love.
And cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.